Chapter 8. Troicinet. As they advanced, ever nearer to their ultimate goal, the days and nights began to bleed together like the ink on a dampened sheet of parchment, and Rhouala could not decipher one from the next, except for the vaguely changing scenery. Fields turned to plains, plains to a light but deadly swamp. Bogfly warned them to stay near the fire the night they spent there, and the whole party slept poorly as the bloodthirsty cries of several distant, mournful creatures shattered the eerie silence. Even Rutherford hunched near the fire that night, mumbling about invisible fiends and demonic presence. Bogfly merely swatted him with his switch and instructed him to keep his agitation and his voice to a minimum. Then they passed farmland. They rolled by fields of harvested cereals, barren now except for the weeds that dotted the soggy, wet soil. They passed a few farmhouses, but saw no inhabitants, and all the windows appeared to be empty eyes, watching them suspiciously as they passed. The houses were either vacant, or the residents therein kept themselves isolated from the strange merchants. Rutherford did his best to keep from view, and stayed behind the tree line, a couple of miles to the west. Bogfly and his passengers drew closer to Troicinet, and as they did, he pulled his vehicle off to the left somewhat. "I'm making a quick stop here. I hope it is no inconvenience." He sneezed violently and glowered. "Transporting you is barely worth it, seeing how much nose salve I must employ to tolerate your dander amongst my belongings. The journey is almost at an end, but I am forced to instruct Rutherford to wait for me here, and not to get himself bludgeoned to death in the streets while dogging my wagon. Perhaps one day I will forget to tell him." He sighed and jumped down, ran into the woods, and a few moments later returned with a concerned frown. "He is not here. Hopefully he has abandoned his folly and has gone to throw himself from the great cliffs at Angor. If not, I have left a phial of my mucus in a tree with a note. The smell should draw him, and he will know what to do." He seemed to say this more to himself than the pair he was ferrying. "All will sort itself out," he reassured himself, and climbed back into the driver's seat. Later, on the road, as they began to approach the outskirts of the booming port city, Rhouala reached out and touched Galen's knee. "Have you ever been to Troicinet?" she asked, somewhat afraid of the answer. "No," he replied. "I was hired out of Pajang and giving directions, but I have never seen Troicinet myself." They held their breaths, waiting for the town from her vision to appear, but as they drew into the city, they sighed, relieved, as it became clearer that this was not the dream town she saw. It was far, far larger, and there were tens of ships harbored there, rather than a single sailing ship. As the company came over the rise that separated the main body of the well-protected city from the rest of the land, they both realized why it was such a historically independent port. Never conquered by another power, it had remained an autonomous city-state, a hub of commerce and interspecies trade for millennia. The steep hills and bluffs that surrounded the town provided a virtually perfect natural barrier. No town wall was necessary. In fact, the natural barrier was far more effective than any man-made structure could ever be. It warded off barbarian hordes and great kings, and the one accessible route in, was closely guarded. The three of them were assailed with questions as to the nature of their travels and the goods they brought with them. Both of them had come up with a suitable tale beforehand. Since Rhouala had recently begun to suffer an intractable headache and chills, they manufactured the story that she suffered from a pregnancy-related condition, and stuck a small pouch of flour into her blouse. They claimed that a trained physician could not be found in their small farming community, and made a good show of being troubled newlyweds, bemoaning the absence of good medicine and the lack of a honeymoon. The guard regarded them with little sympathy, but allowed them to pass with no further interrogation. They pulled from the gate straight onto the main thoroughfare. After some navigation, Bogfly pulled onto a side street and veered from one ancient narrow street to the next, at last arriving in a dingy-looking alley with a single hanging sign proclaiming the presence of the angry matriarch. He pulled his horses to a halt and spoke to Galen. "I will drop you off here. I can attest that this inn is both respectable and discreet. Whatever your intentions, they will not inquire. I will be on the main thoroughfare for the next week, and then I plan to depart. Despite my protestations, you have been the most tolerable passengers I have ever escorted overland. If you find the need to leave in the next week becomes pressing, you may locate me there and depart with me. If not, I shall not see you again, and I hope that you die a most tolerable death." Galen tipped Bogfly generously and said, "I do not think we will be leaving with you. However, I will ask you to keep your I will keep your offer in mind should the need arise. I ask that you perform me a single favor and drop this off along your way." He handed Bogfly a sealed letter with an address written in neat letters across the back. 13A Amargath Road, care of Mr. Domitius White. Very well, this is not far out of my way. I can stop there tomorrow. Galen dropped another large coin in his hand, and he amended his statement. "This afternoon, I meant to say. I trust that this human girl is not infectious. I hope I have not caught one of your hideous human diseases." Galen reassured him that it was magical in origin, and he was not susceptible, and so after retrieving the ailing Rhouala from the back of the wagon, followed by their few possessions, the petulant troll left them standing on the muddy street. As they entered the dingy-looking facade, they were simultaneously shocked by the relative comfort that the interior provided. "I think this place needs to advertise better for itself," Rhouala laughed as she looked around at the hand-carved wooden desk and the fine stone pillars supporting a subdued but elegant lobby. There were deep red velveteen rugs and a lovely fireplace, around which a group of unassociated travelers appeared to be conversing, regaling one another with tales of real or constructed gallantry. Galen checked in at the desk with a shifty, sly-looking creature whose parentage he could not determine. He took the keys and instructed the desk clerk that they were not to be disturbed by anyone but Mr. White. He tossed them once into the air, caught them casually, and asked, "Would you like to stay down here for a bit?" But Rhouala shook her head and turned her face to Galen. He observed that she seemed to be wilting, and her eyes drooped sadly, the momentum of arriving in a new place suddenly gone. "I think I need to rest. I do not feel myself." He nodded in understanding and escorted her up the stairs. He became concerned that she had become far more gravely ill on the trek than she had let on, and his suspicions were confirmed when part way up the stairs she sagged completely, and he had to drop the bags and support her. A moment later she blinked. "Where am I?" she asked. "Is this home?" Galen did not reply, but instead put his arms beneath her and carried her to the room. Once there, he hoisted her up onto one of the beds that occupied the large room. "I am sorry, I have rented us only one room. If you like, I can hang up a length of fabric between us for privacy, but you are sicker even than I thought when I put coin on this room, and I refuse to leave you for the time being." Rhouala smiled. "Thank you. I am not truly feeling well, though for a time I thought it nothing more than a bout of ague. Now, though, I keep seeing people that I know, but then they are gone. I see their lives as perhaps they were, or are, or will be. I do not know which, but it is very confusing. I also see other things, and I do not know if they are here or no. She turns to him. Are you here, Galen? Are you real? Have I thought all this up in my head? Am I really back in Jonagund, trapped in a red madness? Did I ever even leave? He walked to her and kneeled down to her bedside, observing the dark, hollow circles around her eyes and the lank, sickly quality of her otherwise lovely hair. You are here, as am I. I can do no more than give my word on that. I have called for my employer. He is also the one who instructed and assisted me. You are far worse off than I was when he came to me, but I think you will nevertheless have no trouble in helping you. Rhouala turned her eyes to the ceiling. I am glad you are here. I am glad that I am here. Even if I shall die, I think I have had a better time in these past 2 weeks than I have had my whole life, as foolhardy as that may sound. But I must sleep. I am very cold. Tell me, Galen, why is it I see these things? Why does my grandmother stand next to you at this very moment making bread? She blinked and shook her head. Or, I should ask, why are you in her kitchen? Galen looked sadly at her. Your mind cannot deal with the variations in reality, past, present, all possible futures, along with what is now happening. It is too disorderly for your mind. I have felt it, though I do not believe so acutely. We will get Mr. White to you soon, and until then, I ask only that you rest as much as possible, and do your best to stay as much in the here and now as you are able. The wilting girl on the bed grabbed Galen's hand. Sit with me, please. I think that will help. Tell me a story, if you can think of one. So he pulled up a chair and told her stories he remembered from his childhood, harmless fairy tales in which evil and good were easily distinguishable, and the latter prevailed over the former always, even when all seemed lost, and Rhouala drifted off into a troubled slumber, the dream of strange, creeping darknesses, and an endless sea of creatures that lived in that twilight, in which she could not tell friend from foe.